Yeah, I can see that. Thanks. Here we meet again at the post-launch of ELAN 2021, the International E-Conference of Libraries and Allied Subjects in the Network. We have with us, as the first speaker of this session, Professor Maya Dodd. Before going in for the formal introduction, I must thank you, ma'am, for being such a support. I turned to Professor Dodd on previous occasions for my study purposes and received a quick response. The experience is absolutely same and heartening during the organization of this conference as well. Professor Maya Dodd received a PhD from the Stanford University and subsequent postdoctoral fellowships that he received at Princeton University with the Committee on South Asian Studies and the Center for the Study of Law and Governance at JNU India. She has worked on advocacy issues for open educational resources, advocacy for nurturing archives, and digital rights. Since receiving 2 international grants in collaboration on the 1975 to 77 emergency in India and one for creating databases on public history in India. She teaches in the Department of Humanities at Same University in Pune, India. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll just share my screen and please let me know if it's not working.
Yeah, sure.
Hopefully it's fine. Yeah?
Yeah, it's visible.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah. So, I'm really excited to address a community of scholars and practitioners who are, really important to the field that I am representing today, digital humanities. But really, in some sense, they are the most vital players in this entire, knowledge economy and knowledge society, conversation that's been going on. There is a sort of set of questions I'd like to sort of frame this talk by, and I'm just listing them as an overview, as you can see in the slide. I'll kind of pick on basically these topics, and essentially this is my sort of proposition to this community, which is the need to really urgently think through how sort of resources, library resources, digital archives, and all of it can constitute a really vibrant digital commons for use by Indian scholars and practitioners. So this is where I'm coming from, and I hope you'll make some sort of sense of this. So simple question, right? So let's say I'm looking for a novel from the 1850s. It's a Bangla novel, and I want a digitally accessible copy of a novel that comes from that time period. Where should I first look, right? And this is something that 20 years ago, we would not have any sort of option but to physically peruse, the actual spaces that we are sort of described as library spaces. But today, we really have the choice of accessing these digitally in terms of different repositories hanging on different, domains. So specifically, I'm sure many of you are aware of this. There was this fantastic project that came into being called 2 Centuries of Indian Print, where all the books that existed in the British Library, which were in Bangla from the period of around, I think, 1700, to 1900, were digitized and made available through their website. Now, that would be the easiest, fastest, shortest way of accessing the query that I was looking at, right? This Bangla novel, which would be going to the 2 Centuries of Indian Print site and trying to pull it from there. Sorry, I just realized that I may not be in present mode. I hope that this is full screen for you now.
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay, yeah. So essentially, the question of how do you access, something has changed so dramatically that obviously now the question is not the how, but the where. Where do you access something where you might assume that because it's a Bangla novel, it should be available, right, in a certain library of a certain place in West Bengal. But actually speaking, the shortest distance might be the British Library, for instance, website in this case, right? So clearly the answer is far from obvious. And our common sense conception of digital archives is that analog existent archives have been digitized. And that is what a digital archive basically is. Right. So in the case, let's say, of Abhilekh Patal, this is the website for the National Archives of India's collections. The way this has worked is that suppose a person requested access to certain documents. In making those documents accessible for that person, the entire digitized whatever material would then be put up on the website. So by so doing, I hope you can see this site. If you can't, please let me know.
No, it's visible, ma'am. Yeah.
It is, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So in so doing, for instance, this is being the, the National Archives of India website, you end up with things like this, curated collections, right? So clearly, the actual analog collection from this repository would be enormous. But so far, let's say in the case of cartographic records, there are 200 which have been digitized. Now, obviously, the National Archives has much more than 200, records in this case. But the point here is that for whatever reasons, people have asked for these materials, or they have first received priority in the sequence, and they have made their way to the website. So similarly, when we look at, this story, sorry, I'm just going to share this one again. Sorry, I'm just give me a second, yeah. Okay, hoping this works. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, so similarly, we can look for governmental archives on the sort of official websites of, let's say, Pakistan or Sri Lanka or Bhutan, and find surprising kind of materials that we may not know sort of exist, in those domains. And they may be very much a part of a common kind of a cultural sharing, where something that is relevant, right, like in the case of the Bangla novel, yes, of course, the British Library has, many materials of which, and that is one of them. But clearly speaking, what you're going to find where is a very, very unpredictable question in our times. So it is not that simple a case of saying that the materials are either to be found inside India, or that they're simply analog archival materials which have been digitized. Both of these are not at all common assumptions, right? So this is still the question of where is it to be found. Now, the reason why, for instance, that you find the Bangla novel in the British Library is because of essentially the question of patronage, right? They received a grant, which was a thing that enabled that digitization project. And just like the very famous Vichitra project, which also received similar institutional backing, state funding, certain kinds of projects receive more of a kind of a push, right, into being than maybe others which might not be quite so salient today. So even if we talk about kind of bootstrapping, our ecosystem, we talk about minimal computing, we speak of many things which perhaps don't seem to require very much patronage. The fact of the matter is that we do require a whole lot of a very robust ecosystem in order to actually produce these sort of digital collections and stuff. And so obviously there is the need in some sense to start thinking about how do we constitute this, you could call it public sphere. Right. And it is because in digital media now don't just exist in sort of state institutions, but they're also coming from private players, from other publics. We need to think about the idea of these resources as spanning the public and the private, the state and the non-state, the national and the international, so that we can actually really sort of look through the contours of what is this bigger picture. And so this obviously has huge possibility for the university and students doing things with these resources. But more than that, it's actually also about kind of bringing back to the public domain a common memory, right, which is spanned, I think, countries, diasporas, and all kinds of sources. Now, I'm giving this sort of example perhaps for us to just look upon as an instance of how the public and the private have merged in creating these massively rich resources. Now, for instance, if you look at photography, the very, very famous Al-Qazi collection is a privately held collection, right, because of the efforts of private individuals, but obviously is kind of the primary, in some sense, resource for photography archives, right, from this part of the world. Similarly, you'll notice that many music archives are also a function of individual push. Certain individuals have gone out of their way, like Vidya Shah has created Women on Record. The Indian Music Experience is a museum in Bangalore that also has contained these collections. So these are not state-sponsored. These are not coming from a very organized central trust. But essentially what it is a whole range of resources around different interest areas. And they're official and they're unofficial. And this is the point that I would like to kind of make us, remind us of when we're really populating this ecosystem idea of what is it that we can create with it. And a lot of them, are obviously offering access to things which are out of copyright now. But the fact is that there are many things within copyright also which require consideration. Now, I'm not sure that this is very visible to you, but the sort of reasoning behind this is to sort of say that obviously when something is a state archive or a state digitized archive from the state, it usually is open or partially at least open. So this is the case with Films Division, All India Radio, right, Open Government Data, that at least partially, to whatever degree possible, it has been opened up for most of the public. This is often also the case when the issue itself is something that the portal would like for, being publicly salient, publicly accessible. So in the case of the People's Archive of Rural India, again, it's an open archive and people can query it and see what all it has. Oh, sorry. In the meantime, certain other ones, and these are particularly true of American university collections, which have gone digital, but not necessarily to, sorry, I'm not able to scan this very well. But for instance, in the case of the 1947 Partition Archive, it was started by an individual, right, in the area of Berkeley, who was collecting testimonials, right, around the world about the particular India, the partition of India in 1947. And after about at least, I think, 3,000 or some number of testimonials, this recording, this oral history archive is in a sense donated, you could say, to Stanford University, and now that is behind a paywall. So even if something was in the best interest, best intended way, meant to be for the memories of the world, it doesn't often meet that fate. And I think this is why returning to the idea of what a digital commons, etc., is, makes a lot of sense going forward. Now, just to refresh some history for folks here, this is sort of the typical, sort of scholarly story of how, digitization projects often happen. Now, in the case of this particular project, Sanskrit Knowledge Systems, for instance, it began in, I think, 2014 and continued over a few years with financial support from the West. But then, of course, having acquired a Creative Commons license, it is searchable again by anybody in the world, and departs from the American University model of maybe keeping their library domains fairly restricted. Right? Normally, you have to log in or some such to get access to their materials. Unlike that, we have this particular project, which does not require you to log in through the university access, and you can still, browse through the collections. Similarly, here again, we have certain collections which may never have seen light of day, and luckily, again, due to happenstance and funding, this is one that was funded by SSRC with Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute. This project received funding. All right. So clearly, as I mentioned, there are examples of open, right, completely open, often state, archives. Another very important media archive created is Indian Cine.ma and PAD.ma, both media archives not officially created, but with lots of wonderful material. Partially open archives like Tasveer Ghar India, and those behind a paywall, as I mentioned, like the Partition Archive today, which is now with Stanford University. So this is sort of to, I think, just create a sense of what the landscape has, which is much more than either only privately held or only state-sponsored digital archives. But really the question here is that how do we utilize them if, for instance, they are not accessible to the public at large, or if they require many relays in terms of getting to the material. I think there's a sense that we already have now, which is that these digital archives, especially post the pandemic, have been extremely useful and wonderfully, enabling, right, to continue scholarly work, what is called desk research and things. And essentially, even collaborative projects or, all kinds of queries that you can run on digital platforms have changed the way in which we are doing scholarship. So the question of what can we do with it is in a way self-evident, but also is about underlining the importance of why this is significant. As I mentioned earlier, there are also many private citizens and communities who are creating their own memories in terms of databasing that or digitizing that. And so you see in the case of course, Sahapedia, it's a national effort where they have really tried to, for instance, map different cities, create even virtual walking tours. So this sort of combination of how digital tools are enabling yet more public engagement is also a significant way in which this is being used. There's one initiative called by the Heritage Lab, where they're really taking efforts to take what's in the public domain, to remix it and to offer it up to, again, back to the public for kind of using as memes, as tweets, as whatever, right? So there is a sense in which we want to amp up the engagement, for which we need materials, for which we require, as was mentioned previously also, better, metadata, better tagging, interoperability, right? All those things that will make the commons really come alive. Now, obviously, there are reasons why we want communities also to be part of creating these digital archives, not only, again, privately held papers or publicly held, but things which are salient to maybe not obvious communities, but communities which nevertheless have been collecting their own histories. And the idea here, particularly in the case of indigenous languages or particular audiences, is that the way in which this information gets classified should be relevant to their use. So it's not only about creating for the scholar or the, that sort of figure, but really also for generating meaningful data, which is meaningful to those publics who are actually on whom these memories, etc., are created. So obviously we look at this entire sector as connected, and this GLAM sector is famously, the galleries, libraries, archives, and museums together. But really, it's about thinking through a digital infrastructure. And this is a really wonderful paper, which you should sort of look at just to see the conversations on how do we share in a fair way, and how can sort of this ecosystem be thought through in a connected way. So obviously the possibilities through sort of unleashing, in a sense, these digital archives would be a whole new way to read, to understand, to interpret. This is from, yes, a scholarly sort of point of view, but in a way, all these materials are open to anybody who would like to run any kind of analysis of these materials. So the very act of making it sort of not behind a paywall or making it much more public is something that benefits everyone. Some of these stories are collected in this book that we edited. It came out in 2020 called Exploring Digital Humanities in India. And particularly salient here are not just the institutional efforts, but the thinking through about how community archives and such can come to be. So hoping that, there's a very solid sense of what digital archives do. And that is that they help us tell new stories, they help us revisit, which is looking at digital and other traces, right, of other kind of forms of knowledge. They help us collaborate across student, scholarly, and other sort of audiences. And of course, they help us represent in the sense of bringing to light new issues and things which might not have perhaps had their time of day. So the question that I sort of framed this talk with, which was that why, in a sense, do we need to rethink our digital commons, is because it's not just the simple creation of digital archives, which are from an analog idea to digital, or what was already available in a new format, but really it's the thinking through of the whole kind of picture together. And this means not just the idea of creating a resource, but thinking of the audience, not just the idea of generating access, but the how does that access enable a certain analysis or understanding or not. The thinking across Indian languages, which is a really serious issue for the entire sort of information ecosystem, that we can't only operate in linked language terms, and we have to actually sort of enable deeper work, right, in our other languages also. And hopefully through sort of giving that some attention, we will really have increased access in every way, and the creation of an inclusive digital commons which we so desperately need. I'd like to end my talk with just getting some attention onto this new initiative, which I discovered last year. This was in August 2020, that a new manifesto was written for open source South Asia. As we mentioned, open access is a real issue, particularly for us in the global South. And so this effort is to get scholars to really think about where they're publishing, and to think about the question of access at the moment of, in a sense, production. So, many, possibilities will exist if we are more mindful about unleashing that access for larger publics. And I hope that, as a community of scholars and librarians and information scientists, and just a sort of very, I think, dedicated public, and this is an audience that is particularly, I think, dedicated to, knowledge society building. Maybe we can do a lot better if we think through, fairness in both access, equity, and publishing. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Can I just share some of my observations with you? Mm-hmm. I heard you talking. Could you please mute yourself? Yeah. In a previous occasion, I heard you talking about linking PL480 schemes with the scholarly development, that too in a procuring documents in the library, and that's a wonderful, perspective and an alternate perspective in a library setting. Now, just listening to your deliberation this time, can you please tell me something about the possibility of getting fund or support for the memory of the commons, which is particularly deals with the trauma or coming out of the periphery? For instance, in the college, the BB college where it is located, it's called Asansol, and it is the Rad Bangla part, which is largely inhabited by the indigenous people and far from the metropolitan Calcutta. Now, I myself have had know of the collections of the cultural heritage, but I don't know how to preserve them. It's only bound to get decayed, or I don't know what will happen to them. So in this context, the projects that we are generally encounter, you have talked about EAP and other things. In that context, just this question came to my mind, that how is the possibility to get support for this sort of heritages coming out of the periphery, or that memory which deals with the common trauma? Okay, ma'am. Yeah.
No, I think this is exactly, Rajshri, why we need to have more conversations, right? So, we received a grant last year, which is about the ownership of public history. And obviously the sort of public history is owned by its people, right? The people whose history it is. Now, we have never actually had an initiative in this country where you go down to the level of people and say, you tell me your story, which will then be put into textbooks as your version. Right? So that has never happened, and maybe that's particular to textbooks, and that's a very formalized, institutionalized form of history making, which may not work for many reasons. But it doesn't prevent, in any sense, us populating digital platforms, right, with stories. Now, we have started this public history project with Keystone Foundation. This is in the Nilgiris. And what they have been doing is essentially running kind of researcher weekends where you invite community participants. And this are obviously are people who are, let's say, older or who have lived through a certain sense of change and things, to really kind of, in a safe space, exchange not just narrative, but literally through physical artifacts, like let's say a map, right? That you are actually asking them to remember it differently, because what it looks like today may not be the only version of it in terms of the way things have been. So to kind of collect those oral histories, to put them through tools like maps, to put hang these on a platform which would be accessible to many. We can thankfully do much more with audiovisual stuff today. And so how do we integrate? And this is actually the challenge, and I hope one of us will take it on, right? Which is that we need to really rethink what we're calling this sort of idea of the commons, because really speaking, it has to be multilingual. It has to have all kinds of voices, and not just institutional voices. For which reason, I think in the formal sector, our job is to provide that platform space, right? But the collecting those stories and all of that, we can be enablers of that process. But hopefully, finally, the stories will actually come from our audiences. So, yeah.
Absolutely, ma'am. Totally agree with you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much again for your enlightening talk and enriching us. And our next speaker is Dr. Binayak Dasgupta.
Thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Binayak Dasgupta, to whom we may not get back on time at times, but he always gets back to us nicely and in timely manner. Dr. Binayak Dasgupta is an assistant professor in the Department of English at Shivnadar College. And Shivnadar University. Yes, his research focuses on the analysis of historical photographs using visual theory, and computational methods. He's also interested in photographic cultures in South Asia, in digital curation and digital preservation. Dr. Dasgupta, so what do you now? Thank you.
Thank you, Rajoshi. And thank you to the organizers, including Rajoshi, of course, for inviting me to this conference. And I must say that I've been listening to the paper since morning, and it's often it feels really good to be in a room with people who share very similar thoughts. Like I felt that a lot of what was said earlier today really resonated with me, because I feel I echo those thoughts as well. I'm thinking of Professor Ghosh's paper, Professor Dodd's paper. In fact, I'll probably even refer to them over the course of my presentation, or rather paper. I don't really have a presentation. So what really I'd like to talk about is, in fact, perhaps serendipitously, an extension of what has been or is being discussed today, in terms of this question of knowledge production. So I'll give you my take on it. What I'd rather do is that I'd probably give you a basic summary of what I'm going to talk about today. And then I'll read out whatever I've written. In the interest of time, I wrote this down. So I'll just read those out and hope I'm clear while I'm reading. So this paper that I'm going to present really looks at the question of electronic resources. So for example, like Professor Dodd was mentioning, these archives, these excellent resources that are now available. Now we know that these resources are created by the GLAM sector, these galleries, libraries, archives, musea, these what I would think of as a professional space. But they're also created within universities, right? So for example, she mentioned the Vichitra project on which I worked, and that is created within the university. Now, what I'm really questioning today is how one attributes value to electronic resources produced within the academic institutions, right? So, in a sense, what I'm thinking of is both the university as a site for the creation and distribution of knowledge. And I'm also suggesting that not all forms of knowledge production are appreciated equally. Specifically, what I'm trying to say is that the production of research-based electronic collections, for example, like Vichitra, or let's say a project that I worked on called Letters of 1916, or many of the ones that Professor Dodd just showed you on her slides, these research-based electronic collections have traditionally not been attributed the same kind of value as the journal article. And this is one of those comparisons I'd like to make in this paper today. So what is important about a journal article? Well, any of us who has, who is part of academia or these kinds of sort of knowledge-based systems, we know that, or knowledge-based ecosystems, we know that the journal article is really the foundation of this kind of a system. Why? Because it both is the creation and sharing of knowledge, but it is also what the individual academic is assessed on. So, for example, based on the number of journal articles you have, you get, let's say, your promotions, etc., right? Your academic recognition based on the journal articles, which are, in a sense, can be quantified. However, what I'm suggesting is that when you create an electronic resource, and I'm thinking of this as from the perspective of those who create electronic resources. For those who create electronic resources, the electronic resource does not actually have the same kind, or is not given, rather, the same kind of value that the journal article is given. Even if both display similar forms of intellectual effort or similar levels of intellectual effort. So I'm presenting this argument on two fronts. First, I'm going to try and address how the creation of curated image resources, this is something I'm familiar with, so that's why I'm sticking to the example of image resources, follow the same kind of academic rigor, perhaps, that a journal article might display, even if the form of communication of that rigor is different. And the second suggestion that I'm making is that in the current environment, academic publications locate value in specific actions or policies rather than through a recognition of their contribution to knowledge. And hence, I am making what I'm suggesting today is that perhaps we need to find, if we are to find sustainable modes of creating these kinds of resources, right? So let's say as an academic, I want to create a resource and have other academics also engage with it. What kind of recognition should that act of creation get? That is what I'm trying to ask. Now, to do this, I'm going to break this up into a few parts. In the first part, I'm going to look at the relationship between knowledge and power. Specifically, I'm looking at this question of legitimacy, because as we will see, this question of legitimacy is where a lot of this value creation is or rests, right? So a person you might be very familiar with, for example, Foucault, and he's talking about the university, explores the relationship between knowledge and power, right? And he heralds the university and the academic as these privileged points of intersection, where intellect, knowledge, and power collide. He suggests that the crisis of the university is not located in a loss of power, but in how intellectuals relate to the academic system, the manner in which that power is reconfigured, the manner in which the notion of knowledge has transformed, and how it has affected our perceptions of how it is created, distributed, and used. To understand the reasons for which electronic resources are undervalued, right? And this is what I claim, that they are undervalued. Undervalued not perhaps by its peers, but rather by the system. And the knowledge they impart is not given equal credit. It is important to understand the relationship between power, knowledge, and legitimacy. Now, these you can, for most of us, if you think about Western political thought, you'll find these questions being this question being present in the works of Marx, Karl Mannheim, Durkheim, Max Weber, just mentioned Foucault. So all of these people rather are questioning this relationship between knowledge and power. If you went through these, it is possible to assimilate some different facets of this relationship. Right? As Hans Weller illustrates, the inherent hierarchies in the production of knowledge are offset by reciprocal legitimization of knowledge and power. Different domains of knowledge are endowed with unequal status. There was this article by Stanley Fish, I believe, I think it was New York Times. And there was this casual dismissal of digital humanities as something that was inherently methodologically inferior. And I felt that when I read it, that it sort of incorrectly homogenized all practices within an umbrella discipline like digital humanities, and it negated the existence of intellectual activity in the pursuit of knowledge. So how knowledge is created? The methodological is devalued regardless of the body of knowledge that is being produced. So what I'm suggesting is that there becomes this question of method that supersedes the body of knowledge that is being created. We all know that academia is this hierarchical pyramid, which serves to reorganize knowledge in terms of prestige and influence. The electronic resource, perhaps because it is unfamiliar in shape and form, perhaps not unfamiliar to the lot of us who perhaps are actively engaged with these kinds of objects, but for the larger majority, it is unfamiliar. And these electronic resources can neither lean on the prestige and influence of world-renowned publishers, right? Nor can it rest on the certainty of some recognized institutional net. And if you read Weber, for example, power requires legitimization. And it is the basis on which modern Western political thought is derived. Knowledge requires legitimization and to have a claim to credibility, to recognize what is of value. The history of social thought has seen a transformation in the recognition of knowledge, from the revelation of mystical experience to deductive logic of scholasticism to the epistemologies of scientific proof. These foundations are not stable, for they're tied to social, cultural, and circumstantial experiences. These changes cannot be explained in terms of content of knowledge itself. Herein lies the greatest challenge in locating the value of electronic resources. It is not the content of these resources that can legitimize these works. It is necessarily the power structures that surround the production of these that can legitimize and in turn render value to these resources. What I'm claiming is that it's not the use of it. A lot of these electronic resources are widely used. A lot of these have received international recognition, but that has not made them valuable in that academic merit sense, right? Where something you can use to get your promotion, or something that you can use to find a job. So even if these resources contain the same verifiable academic quality, their legitimacy is dependent on how peers, publishers, more importantly, and wider scholarly community, and most importantly, the system within which we exist, receive and recognize them. Now, on to the second part. I hope this bit about the relationship between knowledge, power, and legitimacy is sort of understandable. Now, I'll move, and in the interest of time, I'll move on to this question of image resources, right? And because I'm familiar with them, I'll talk a little about how these image resources are created. And I'll try to show you that there is a lot of thought, right, that goes into the production of these kinds of works. And anyone who's worked in the GLAM sector knows the amount of work required to make something cognizable. So the curation of images, specifically photographs, because I work on photographs, it's not a mechanical process. It's not a process that can be automated, right? It requires a thorough understanding of the subject. a lucid grasp of technical frameworks. I'm thinking of these digital resources, of course. The building of a photographic research collection through careful curation and presentation at its most basic level is a way of providing access to a series of documents. It is in spirit no different to the task of the textual editor. This access is not merely for retrieving an object, but to also guide our understanding of it. It helps in absorption of the content. The creation, production, and publication of resources has been traditionally the realm of libraries, cultural heritage, and memory institutions. However, with the advent of digitization techniques and the advancements in the epistemological pursuits of its methodological variances, the university has become a viable space for the formation of such initiatives. And this is something I suppose some of us are, or many of us are familiar with. Research collections don't merely digitize and make resources available. There would be little academic value to that. These forms of collections are built around research in addition to creating access. They provide the critical apparatus through which an understanding of that content is possible. Right? So I'm thinking of, for example, if you look at Vichitra and its collation team, right? It allows you to understand the content of that work or the content of that resource. Such initiatives are not merely ludic, but deeply functional. They provide digitized source materials that a researcher can consult or use in their own scholarly work. They provide the means through which the content is made familiar and accessible. However, there are concerns in the manner in which these collections are formed. There is critical thought behind the kind of access they provide, framed within the question of obsolescence, every digital object, I suppose, and a question of need. The problem of collection are no means solved. So it's not a perfect system in that sense. The course of a collection is peculiar and perhaps even an intangible process. So the digital collection is built on a series of decisions or informed choices that exhibit the same critical choices that any other form of scholarship exhibits. These decisions are governed by several concerns: best practices, institutional requirements, the availability of resources, and how scholarly value is communicated determine how the digital collection is formed. From a practical perspective, one would imagine that the production of these collections is always with the latest technology, with hardware and software, the highest available quality and perfect curation. But as we all know, this is not always the case. Decisions made in the process of its creation affect the life of the collection. The modes in which it is perceived and the means through which it is sustained are embedded in the decisions made in its inception. I'm just wondering if I should, okay, to elaborate on these decisions, consider the resolution to which a photograph may be scanned for the creation of a digital surrogate. So if you can make it, you can scan it poorly and it's perhaps not legible or clear. Is there any value to that? So while best practices may dictate scanning the photograph at the highest available resolutions and saved in uncompressed or the least compressed formats, these raise concerns. Scanning at high resolutions and saving images uncompressed require very large file sizes or produce very large file sizes. Processing these images takes significant computational powers and effectively a much longer time. With the production time of each digital artifact increased due to this, the entire project consequently takes longer to complete. Again, these images need to be scaled down to create web-friendly versions if we are thinking about creating electronic resources for the web. While batch productions are possible, they still involve significant time. The process of digitizing takes significant man-hours, in turn raises costs. This was what Orjan was also talking about earlier. The decisions in the digitization process that have to consider these aspects in mind before meeting the very high standards set by best practice guides. The production of the digital archive then is a negotiation between best possible version and its bare minimum content. The second issue is a curatorial concern, articulating whatever knowledge one has of the object in a machine-readable format is a time-consuming, meticulous process. The curators attempt to wrap the digital entity in tags, markers, what we call metadata, right, in a cognizable and standardized manner to create a cognizable object. The creation of digital collections requires more than the availability of scanners, cameras, and a knowledge of metadata schemata. The primary problem of creating digital resources, especially with historical artifacts, because I'm talking about photographs, lies in the process of their curation. Beyond the technical challenges, the metadata attribution, curatorial expertise is required to foster some understanding of the digital object. Right? So what I'm trying to sort of address, and I'll sort of move on a little bit because I think I won't make up in terms of time. What I'm trying to address is that there is, and I had an example to share with you, but I think I'll skip that for the moment. What I'm trying to say is that every act of digitization, right, whether it's in the GLAM sector, whether it's in the university, right, they require knowledge, they require skill and expertise. This expertise is the same kind of expertise one requires to write a journal article. It's no different, but it's expressed in a different way. Right? What I'm going to do is to move on. I might come back to this later, just in the sake of time, or for the sake of time. So I'm going to move on to the third part, and this third part is actually about this question of credibility, authenticity, and the locus of value. Right? So where does scholarly value, both in scholarly articles and research collections, lie? And how do we as academics produce credible work? One might argue that the forms in which the scholarship is expressed in a journal article is different from that in a collection, as I was just talking about. The nature of scholarly articles allows for a discursive approach within a rigid structural framework in terms of form, language, argument. The exposition that a scholarly article presents is necessarily different from that produced within an electronic resource. The scholarly value of research collections are not explicit, rather they're implicit, and perhaps not as visible to the external observer. The validity of academic work lies in verifiability. From graduate essays to books on scholarly subjects, every argument, every statement, every presented fact must be substantiated. This is, anyone who's written an academic paper knows that we need to substantiate whatever claims we make. It is understood that scholarly work must always be open to scrutiny and non-textual resources such as scholarly resources on image and sound suffer from a different issue. Non-verbal resources are not self-describing. So image can't describe itself. And they require secondary sets of textual.
You're muted, Binay.
Sorry, am I audible again?
Yeah.
Sorry. So what I was saying was that non-textual resources such as resources of image and sound are not self-describing. So we need to use metadata to make them cognizable. So electronic resources then must stand up to the same degree of verification that a scholarly article demonstrates. If for the sake of legitimization, scholarly resources require verification, the modes of information attribution need to be rethought. So I'm suggesting that the way we write metadata right now, because it is effectively borrowed from the GLAM sector. And the GLAM sector, while of course they rely on expertise, don't need to legitimize their work in the same way. It is just a purely academic requirement. So I'm suggesting that perhaps just in the way metadata is attributed, we can perhaps think about putting in this question of verifiability. So for instance, if a photograph is a certain date, who gave it? And how do we know that the attributed date is true? Now, libraries, archives, museums do not operate within the same value environment that academic centers are rooted to. Their value is not determined by demonstrable verifiability. These institutions are based on expertise derived from training. Their cataloging is a functional exercise. The trust in their curation lies in an understood expertise. that cultural heritage and library sciences professionals possess. While a similar degree of trust might be there for the academic, the work that is produced within academic environments must always be verifiable. While the onus of verification is on the author, the act of verification often falls on the peer reviewer. And this brings us to this question of the peer review. And again, us working in the academic space, we know that peer review effectively is what legitimizes the journal article. And the process of peer review, despite its many faults, I'm sure we have experienced the faults of peer review, is a way of testing the quality and validity of an academic argument. It is the de facto method to legitimize a piece of work. So my question is that I'm going to skip over this, but there is a history also to how peer reviews came about. Right? The peer reviews didn't start exactly in the form that we know of it today, that there has been an evolution, like a continuous evolution. And one might be optimistic and say this continuous evolution of the peer review suggests that the legitimacy that is sought by electronic resources can be found, and it is merely a question of time before these kinds of resources are given the same kind of recognition. However, the perceived value can only be found if these resources provide the evidence of scholarship within them. I'm not questioning the scholarship within these resources. It's the evidence of scholarship that becomes difficult to communicate. What are the facets of peer review? What are the facets that the peer review of a resource should consider? This is a question that I pose to you. How should scholarly works produced for these resources be made more transparent? These are the questions that remain and need to be addressed in the pursuit of legitimacy. Finally, I'll conclude. I won't take up much of your time. Scholarly electronic resources may be seen to suffer from a crisis of identity. While it is fairly common to see such resources within academic institutions, they follow no common protocol. This is something also was being mentioned in the morning. Different resources frame themselves in different way. While there's nothing inherently wrong with this, it becomes difficult to measure their value on the same scale. For these collections to be recognized as valuable sources of knowledge, the frameworks within which these they need to be assessed have to be determined. As knowledge legitimizes power, it derives a great deal of legitimacy from decisions of the state. Decisions on, for instance, what is learned in educational institutions, how we interact with the products of this form of scholarship, what knowledge is required to qualify for offices and careers, what sort of research can avail of public funding, etc. In all of these decisions, the central theme relates to how one form of knowledge is prioritized over other forms of knowledge. The conversation on scholarly resources then has to move beyond this self-reflexive monologue, debating its own value, to one that I know this article is doing exactly that, to one that considers the wider landscape of knowledge and community. How do we use, assess, and value resources? How can the scholarship that is undeniably present in all the examples that we'll be talking about today be made more transparent? What aspects of these should be put forward for verification through the processes of peer review, if that is the way forward? The questions faced by these forms of intellectual pursuit are many. They're not answerable perhaps today. They need more thought, consideration, and time. Thank you.
Wonderful. Very, very thoughtful presentation, Dr. Dasgupta. And the way you have ended it, it gives rise to the need of ongoing conversation beyond the scope of this conference, and we would do that. We would also can collate some questions and send to you across afterwards, because we are much pressed against the time, as you know. But I couldn't help but share with you one of my thought, and I'd like to have your comment on that. As you correctly said, images or the digitized artifact talked in the language of metadata. But if I pose it in a different way, the users of those images or the readers of those images would like to see the language of OCR also been adopted in this conversational process, where metadata is one part and OCR could be the another part. And we all know that OCR is not much developed area as far as the Indian and multiple languages is concerned. In this context, how do you see these scanned images, piled up images, are would they end up in some sort of unused? Then again, those just end up as a general scene in library these days. I mean, vast and unused shelves and the dark chambers and deep layers of the just like the web in the library buildings as well. Would they end up in the? Would they meet the same fate? This is for one, and for another, just please spare me. I also the huge data it also generates during the scanning process and also while developing the metadata, taking into consideration whatsoever standard you feel like. That huge data, do you think in any because you end up your talk with some questions, do you think the future scholarship would much more depend on the curation of the data? I mean, the way data is being generated. I mean, do you think the document there could be just like the author, there could be the date of the document also, which is also in a way biased and etc. So please have a comment on that.
Thanks, Rajesh. Two things. The first, which you're talking about, this question of OCR and multilinguality, is very difficult to answer this question. I'll tell you why. The thing is that think about any resource, right? And it has this, let's assume that when you're talking about OCR, I'm going to assume that we are talking about a print an archive with a catalog that already has the necessary information, right? So you can scan an image, but you also parallelly scan the catalog that describes the catalog entry that describes the image, right? And then that is converted into text. Sure, great. If it's in, let's say it's in English or in the Latin alphabet, there's no problem because OCR is quite decent. But what about other languages? So one can think about, so for example, handwritten work, difficult to decipher, but even other typefaces might not necessarily be clear to a machine which is trying to optically recognize characters, right? The two possible ways forward. One is that you do as much as possible and you leave the rest to manual. So by what I mean is that you let the OCR work out as much as possible and you leave the rest for manual revision. And this manual revision, can be done in multiple ways. It can be done by a group of experts and editors, or it can be done in crowdsourced projects. And we know all these, the Bentham Project, et cetera, which use this idea of transcription and sort of community transcription to convert written things into electronic characters, right? That's one possibility. The second possibility might be that you use controlled vocabularies. So vocabularies which don't necessarily rely on language, but rather rely on resources. And that actually is would perhaps even overcome the problem of language itself, because that controlled vocabulary can be multilingual. There is no problem because it effectively points to a resource as opposed to resolving in language itself. So these are the two possibilities that I can think of off the top of my head. The other question you asked was about big data. And here there is an interesting problem. You see, with big data and images, there is information which is intrinsic to the image, right? Which is, for example, you see a tree, or there's a painting of a tree and a painting of a house, and which is in the image itself. If that's the case, one assumes that our computational methods will improve to the point and they're already quite good, but they will improve to the point that they're able to understand the relationship between different objects in an image. So that's the question. It's not just recognizing an object, it is recognizing the relationship between objects in the image. The question is more difficult when the information you're looking for is not present in the object itself. For instance, when it was created, somebody could have signed it with a date. We can pick that up. But let's say that is not present in the image. That at least I don't know of any way, obvious way in any case, where that kind of information, extrinsic information, can be found computationally. One way it could be done is that if a large enough set was available for the machine to go through, it could look for, let's say, similar images or images that belong to the same set. Let's say it's the same film, right? Or the same reel, and it can find the same image. And then it might be able to pull out the data from a priorly attributed image. But otherwise, I don't think that extrinsic information of that sort can necessarily be found computationally. At least this is my opinion from what I understand and what I know. So that's it. I would suggest that we would have to separate that which is already in the image and how we can computationally analyze that, and that which is external to the image, and that probably still requires an expert to sit through and attribute to the image. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah. Short of thank you so much. Yes, of course, image processing is a vast area. One of my friends is also working on that field and using Mohalolomi's distance for analyzing and all that. It's a vast area of work. And just thinking about the control vocabulary part that you mentioned, there is a broad category of schemes or standards in LIS field and also in other memory institutions must know that the mostly they use those are, we are kind of habituated or made to be habituated with certain things called user friendliness. So we also in generally see the user friendly standards are in use, but the people outside the LIS field know less about a certain system developed by who is called the father of the library and information science, the faceted system. It basically breaks down the every faceted because it breaks down every object in its code facet. Therefore, it progressively reduces the need to use the language and other things, which is varies. So these are the things which we would like to explore in our journey. I think towards the finality of our academic need. Wonderful talk, Vinayak. Thank you so much for enlightening us. Now we would go into the paper presentation session of the day, and let me take a break for 4 to 5 minutes, and we come back with the paper presentation. So I would request all the paper presenters be present in the meeting room, and we'd call out names alphabetically for the presentation. It won't be a much longer session, unfortunately. Everyone would be for seeing the huge paper that we have received. It would be 6 to 7 minutes presentation for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajesh, and thank you to the organizers. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah. We'll start the paper presentation. Let me just call out the names of the presenters in alphabetical order, and those who are present, please let us know that you are here and start.
Hello. Hello, sir.
Yes.
My name is Santosh Kumar Kanojia. I'm listing in the presentation paper presentation in the list. But sir, I can't present my presentation for today. Can I tomorrow?
Yeah, you can do that tomorrow. And your name starts from the S, so I think your turn will eventually come in the tomorrow only. Okay, thank you.
Sir. Thank you, sir.
Is Mr. Ashok Kumar is here? Mr. Ashok Kumar? Seems to be not here. Ms. Boijanti Mukhopadhyay? হ্যাঁ ম্যাম আপনি আছেন ইউ মে স্টার্ট প্রেজেন্টিং ইওর পেপার নাও ইয়া
আচ্ছা রাজশ্রী আমাকে কি বলতে হবে নাকি ভিডিও যেটা পাঠানো হয়েছে সেটাই দেখানো হবে?
না যেহেতু ওটা তো আমরা সাবমিশন নিয়েছিলাম তো এখন আপনি প্রেজেন্ট করতে পারেন।
আচ্ছা
5 মিনিটের মতো, তার বেশি নয়। হ্যাঁ।
Good day everyone. I am Professor Boijanti Mukhopadhyay, Associate Professor, Department of Bengali, Banwarilal Bhalotia College, Asansol, and my paper is titled Books in Libraries and Libraries in Books, a critical study of the famous libraries in fiction. The universal appeal of libraries to readers lies in the fact that they are the home to books, but it is also an undeniable fact that fiction has also housed a large number of libraries, sometimes as a location setting and at other times as an essential part of the plot. In a lot of novels, the library serves as a center where much of the action unfolds. My paper would consist of a critical study of some of the most famous libraries in literature. The first library that I would deal with in this paper is the library of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in the Harry Potter series of J.K. Rowling. It is home to tens of thousands of books dealing with magic and charms, including the pivotal fantastic beasts and where to find them, Quidditch through the ages, and Hogwarts a history. This library, interestingly, also has a forbidden section, and this section houses some of the books dealing with dark magic or dark arts, as they are called in the magical terminology. This section houses books such as Secrets of the Darkest Arts and most potent portions. A student, in order to borrow from the forbidden section, requires a written permission from one of the teachers of Hogwarts. The library becomes a very important setting where Harry, Ron, and Hermione create much of their plans and acquire knowledge in their fight against dark arts from the huge section of books in the library. In American author Ray Bradbury's science fiction novel Fahrenheit 451, the library becomes a very important part of the plot. It deals with a dystopian situation where books have been outlawed and some rebels fight back, making them living libraries. The novel actually is a fictional account of the historical role of book burning in suppressing dissenting ideas for change. George Louis Borges' short story, The Library of Babel, depicts a universe consists of a library of hexagonal rooms. The universe in this story by the Argentine author conceived of the universe as a vast library consisting of all possible permutation and combination of 410 pages of a certain format and character set. The library must contain all useful information, including prediction of the future, biographies of any person, and translation of every book in all languages. Jean Swan Downey has an entire series of books of fiction dealing with libraries and librarians. The most interesting of the books is the first book of the series, The Ninja Libraries, The Accidental Tea Hand, which follows a sword-wielding girl who apprentices herself to a secret society of the warrior librarians, whose job is to protect writers from getting into trouble for the with an unusual skill, who finds himself battling against a cult of evil librarians who secretly rule the world. Stephen King's novella, The Library Policeman, weaves a unique plot, revolves a library in which, if a man forgets to return some books he borrowed from the library, the phantom librarian sends the library policeman to terrorize him. For the time crunch, I focused on the most important texts, which include libraries as an essential and supplementary element of the plot. My paper will basically be in the form of a literature survey of these and some other texts. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Wonderful, Bhalotia. Let us move on to the next speaker, Mr. Bipin Chandra Pant. Is Mr. Bipin Chandra Pant here? Mr. Bipin Chandra Pant, Mr. Vishwajit Adhikari.
Yes, I am here.
Okay.
Hello.
You may start. Yeah, sure. Mr. Adhikari, you may start your presentation, please.
Please allow me to share my screen.
Yeah, you can share it, I think. Wait, can't you share your screen now?
No, it is inactive.
Okay, just wait.
Sharing option is inactive.
Yeah. Wait, please wait. Try now, please.
No. Yes.
Yeah.
Is it visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Hello?
And you are audible. Yes, it's visible and you are audible. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So, very good afternoon to all. Respected dignitaries, respected convener, and my learned fellow participants. The title of the presentation is Small Press, Little Magazine, and Library, the Inevitable Alliance to Archive the Local History and Culture. Let's start with a simple proposition. Every small towns and distant villages have its own history, heritage, and culture. Even a few decades back, those history, heritage, and culture were confined inside the oral rendering of local people. Now, after the printing system has become easier and affordable, the talks and stories are being documented. Usually, the authors of those documents are very common men, and they cannot always reach or contact to the big publishers of big cities. Also, it does not mean that big publishers are always agree to publish those. Inevitably, the small press and the little magazine are the ones to rely on in this regard. And we must say that the small presses and little magazines have been doing the job with care over the years. In every small towns of West Bengal, there are 1 or 2 small presses and at least 2 or 4 little magazines. They publish some exclusive books and articles on local history, local heritage, folklore, folk culture, etc. It is not possible to create an archive on local history and culture overlooking those documents. However, those presses and magazines are usually small scale, Sikh and non-profit industry, and thus very short-lived. Therefore, the books and articles they publish are also volatile, ephemeral, irregular, and inconsistent. The local library must, I am talking about both academic and public library, must take some responsibility in this regard. They can assure some monetary return for those poor and non-profit organizations subscribing their publications. In exchange, the library can get some invaluable literatures on local history and heritage. The laws of library science. Now, if we can ignore the physical boundary of the library, if we can negate the walls, then the laws are to be modified. Then we can have all the documents in the society are for use. Every reader of the society, his or her documents, every document in the society, its reader. Librarians inquest for resources. Besides different day-to-day housekeeping works, the librarian has some other responsibilities too. Realizing the special subject interest of the people of the surrounding localities, discovering the neglected issues to be emphasized, documented, and archived, searching for newer documents on any particular topic or issues, etc., etc. The Legal Magazine, we all know, a non-commercial periodical of limited circulation, usually dedicated to publishing experimental art and literature and or unconventional social ideas and political theories. We all know the famous examples, Dial, Poetry, The Little Review, etc. from the West, and Sobujpatro, Kollol, Krittiba, Sonustu, Baromas, etc. from our state. Little Magazine, what they publish, besides art and literature, the Little Magazine also publish articles on different contemporary social issues. They publish some exclusive reports and essays on local history, biography, archaeology, culture, heritage, etc. They publish some authentic essays on folklore and folk culture of surrounding localities. A few examples. For example, there are nearly 120 little magazines at the towns and villages of undivided district of Bindapur as per the data taken on 2010. Out of those, at least 20 magazines publish articles on different local issues on regular basis. Some of the prominent examples are Amritolok, Shabder Michil, Nabyasrot, Ebong Shayok, Srijon, Lokokriti, etc. Small press publishers. Small presses are alternatives to the commercial establishment, issuing works that larger publishers avoid for commercial or editorial reasons. Our small presses in our country, as compared to those of the Western countries, they are usually originated from one or two little magazines. Yeah, 3 or 4 small presses. What they publish local history and biography, local archaeology, local manuscripts, local heritage, local folklore, local rituals and cultures, etc. Some small presses. As on 2010, there are more or less 20 small presses in the divided district of Bindapur. They publish numbers of original and authentic documents on local issues. Some of such publishers are Amritolok, Kobitika, Upottaka, Ostrik, Bak.
Mr. Bishwajit Adhikari, are you there? Yes, yes. I think he has lost his connection due to the network issues. But it's been a wonderful presentation still. Let me call upon the next speaker in line, Mr. G.S. Murali. Is this person in here? Mr. G.S. Murali. Okay. Mr. Ganendra Kumar. Mr. Ganendra Kumar. Ms. Julie Thakuria. Because she was here, I have. Maybe Mr. Odhikari has returned back. Mr. Vishwajit Odhikari, can you listen to us?
Yes.
Okay,
Was it disconnected?
Yes, it was disconnected. You are
I like to.
You are on that. Yeah. Don't worry. You just end up your talk. You are on the slide where the Medinipur, those little mags of the Medinipur. You are on that slide.
Okay.
You can start over from them and please quickly end up in 2 to 3 minutes. Okay.
Yes.
After that, Miss Julie Thakuria would take over. Miss Julie Thakuria, please be here.
Sir, is it visible now?
Yes, it's visible. Please end up your presentation in 2 minutes.
Okay. Actually, we are talking about the tripartite alliances among library, small press, and digital magazine. A librarian as the curator, we would like to see in the virtual era, the role of the librarian has been changed radically. As the nature of the documents has been changed, the tools, techniques, expertise of the librarian also been changed. From a custodian of the stack room of printed books, the librarian is now become the curator of history, heritage, and culture of the society. Am I audible? Hello?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
The new library will be such a forum which can accommodate all possible kinds of relationship illustrated in the slide. Now, libraries equal to strong communities, and I like to conclude with a dream. We have libraries in our society already. We wish to have a society which will be library driven or library centric, and we dream of that society which will be synonymous to library. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishwajit Babu, for your very apt presentation. Now, may I call upon Ms. Julie Thakuria to please present her case. Ms. Julie Thakuria, are you here? I can. Miss Julie Thakuria. I can see her in the participation list, but maybe network problem. Let me call upon the next speaker. J. Kiran. Is J. Kiran here? Am I audible? Miss J. Kiran? Miss Jyotsna Ranjan?
Yes, sir.
Miss Ranjan.
Hello?
Okay. Miss Ranjan, it's, you may go ahead and tell me.
Sir, I want to share my screen, but I can't do it.
Yeah. Wait for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, now you may share your screen and talk.
Okay, sir. So is it visible?
Not yet.
Not visible.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. The screen is coming.
Just-
yeah,
just-
it's visible right now.
Okay.
Or maybe
Okay,
due to
sir.
the network. Yeah, it's.
Okay. Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Jyotsna Ranjan and I am PhD scholar of Mahatma Gandhi Central University of Bihar, Motihari.
Sorry to interrupt you. Jyotsna, please.
Yes, sir.
Your screen is again gone. Please try the process over again, please. The sharing thing.
Okay.
The screen is gone. Yeah.
Just a second, sir. Now, sir?
It would come. Give it some moment. It would come.
Okay. I think there is a network issue from my side.
Yeah. Okay, you can start talking. It would come, I guess. You shared the whole. You did the whole process, right? For the sharing.
Yes, sir, I have shared, and yeah, from my end, it's reflecting sharing. It's been shared.
Yeah. It's coming. Yeah, it's visible,
Okay,
right?
sir.
Yeah.
Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Jyotsna Ranjan and I'm PhD scholar of Mahatma Gandhi Central University of Bihar, Motihari. So the topic for my presentation is digital literacy and awareness of artificial intelligence technologies among users, a study. So let's begin. This is the overview of my presentation. First of all, I'll be covering introduction part. After that, artificial intelligence, objectives, scopes, and methodology, data analysis, and at last, conclusion part. So let's begin with the introduction. So as we all know that this is the technological advancement time. So it's playing a very bit smarter role in enhancement and updating, which enables one to improve performance critically and sustain capacity. So we can say that artificial intelligence is the ability of machine which allows to deal with the intelligent behavior of human. So basically the paper approaches the concept of digital literacy, artificial intelligence technologies, awareness and its application in variety of sectors and library users. So the definition, according to Merriam-Webster dictionary, the artificial intelligence can be said as an area of computer science that deals with giving machines the ability to seem like they have human intelligence. So on the other hand, we can say that artificial intelligence have a variety of things that it allows one to be capable of solving problems, new skills, developing new skills, reasoning capability, adapting to a new situation and various of the problems. Some of the features that is included in this is expert system, speech recognition, machine learning, robotics, and so on. So this is basically these are the objectives of my study: to know the digital literacy level among the users, to find users awareness level of Web 3.0 tools and technology. Third one is to ascertain if trendy technologies have been adopted by users or not, to find ease of emerging technologies in academic purpose. So the scope and the methodology. The scope for the present study is basically focused on the PG and research scholars of Atal Bihari Vajpayee Central Library, that is of Mahatma Gandhi Central University of Bihar, Motihari. So the methodology that has been adopted for the study is descriptive survey method, which in which questionnaire was used as a research tool that was distributed to the users via online and offline mode among 167 users, where 148 response was recorded.
Your slide is not moving, Jyotsna. Please look into that. Your slide is not moving.
Moving?
It's not moving. It's in the first.
It's not moving.
Side only. Yeah,
On my side, it's. I think, sir, from my end there is a network issue.
Okay.
So
okay. Just let me tell you that. Okay, you can go ahead and
move this. Okay.
in 3 minutes wrap up, please. Yeah.
Okay. So. Okay. Thank you, sir. So that in data analysis, 167 questionnaires were distributed and the 148 response was received. That was 88.62% was received. After that, the table here is reflecting the digital literacy competency level, where in very high category, 10.81% was gained, and in high category, 53.37% was gained. That means 53.37% users are digitally competent with in high category. So the purpose to use digital information, this is the third table that is representing purpose to use digital information by the users, where users are using the digital information for assignment purpose, project, research work, content creation, writing articles, and gaining knowledge. Where in gaining knowledge category, 100% result was recorded, followed by 73.64% response in project work, and in assignment it was recorded 65.54%. So this is the next table that represents level of awareness of emerging technologies. So in fully aware category, 89.18% was recorded in media, social media. That is, users are fully aware of social media with 89.18%, followed by 43.24% in web app and 36.48% in artificial intelligence. And in partial awareness category, so 66.21% was gained in Internet of Things, followed by 65.54% in cloud computing and 62.83% in storytelling, and so on. So in not aware category, 29.72% was recorded in Internet of Things category. So next table represents the application of Web3 tools and technologies for academic purpose, where various tools, Web3 tools were used by the users for academic purpose, such as semantic forum, augmented reality, microblogging, intelligent search engine, semantic forum, and so on. So in frequently used thing, it was 45.94% was recorded in intelligent search engine. That means users are using intelligent search engine with 45.94% in frequently using, and so on. It's 42.56 in microblogging and 41.21 in semantic forum. In less frequently used category, 59.45 was recorded in virtual labs, followed by 57.43 in machine learning. So this was my presentation, and at last conclusion, I want to conclude it that there is a frequently change from print to digital era that reflects the need of the emerging tools and technologies to the library users and the society. So the study investigated digital literacy level, its awareness of Web3 technologies, its application in academic process. So digital literacy competency level was high with 53.3%. Most of the users are fully aware of social media technologies. Intelligent search engine was frequently used for the academic purpose. Purpose to use digital information was mainly to gain knowledge with 100% response. So users are partially aware of artificial intelligence technologies with 58.78% response. Thank you, and these are some of the references that I will take in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jyotsna, for your presentation. Now the next person is in line is Koti Thabamani. Is Miss Koti Thabamani here? Okay, I am calling out the other name. Kiran Kumar, Krishnaraj S, Kuldeep P. Power, Loknath Paital. Nobody is here. Okay, and Manpreet Kaur, Mary Florence Freda, Mohammad Ismail M, Mr. Gupta is going to say something. Mr. Sanjeev Gupta. Okay, let me just call out those names. Mary Florence Freda. For today's selection, those who are present, please make themselves known. Mary Florence Freda, Mohammad Ismail, Mohammad Umar, Mom Chattopadhyay, Nagules, Nisha Joshi, Pratibha, Pankaj Singh. Okay. Is there anyone who going to present for tomorrow? He or she can present now. Any presenters here in the meeting room?
Yes, Rajasi, I want to present today.
Okay, please go ahead, do that. You're ready with your PPT?
Yes, sir, yes. I am sharing my screen.
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
Please allow.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is my screen visible, Rajasi?
Yes. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Very good afternoon to all of you, respected dignitaries, coordinator of ELAN 2021, and all the respected member of ELAN 2021, and all the friend participants. My topic is managing open information resources for the undergraduate students. I am Pradut Kumar Mondol, librarian of Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose College, going to uh, give something on this topic. As per the introduction, library has great responsibility for the development of the society, like to end poverty, to end hunger, to ensure healthy lives, to ensure inclusive and equitable education, etc. On the other hand, this is the day of information and communication technology, information explosion beside COVID-19 or pandemic situation. This situation completely changed the educational environment and the library system. All these combined factors challenge the library profession. To combat this situation, librarians should be innovative in mind and adopt viable strategy of open information resources. Open information resources are the research material that have been made available to the general public at free of charge. Data, database, books, and article, including research article, may be open information resources. Open information resources can be obtained, reused, revised, remixed, and can be redistributed. Retain means we have the right to make own or download the things, and control copies means it can be stored and managed. Reuse means open information provides the right to use the content or information in a wide range of ways. So we can use in groups or we can use in website. Revise means this gives the right to adapt, adjust, and modify or alter the content. So we can translate the content into another language. Remix means right to combine the original or revise the content to create something new. Redistribute open information can be redistributed among others. In this way, open information can help, support, guide, and relieve. Open information resources has some benefit also, like access. Open books or open journals or open repositories do not impose cost on the reader, so price cannot be a barrier or removed entirely. It can be accessed from far away anytime, and any number of users can read at a time. Immediacy, the research result can be made immediately available, so no need to wait like physical research result or traditional book or periodical, etc. Easy access to open information resources inspires others doing research in interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary subject. And it has been found that in case of subscription journal, if it has 38% impact factor, but if this journal is available in open platform, then in citation will be reached to about 62%. And the articles can be easily located if it is in the open access domain. In particular, searching within the article or recommending and sharing it with others is facilitated to a great extent. I have divided the open access site into two parts. Part Indian initiative, Indian or UGC initiative, that is the National Digital Library of India, ENLIS, EC Sundhu, Sud Ganga, EPG Parsala, IGNU, e-resources, NPTEL, SWAM, POVA, Virtual Lab, NISCAC, Online Periodical Repository. All these, this site provides free information resources to the users. For that, we don't have to pay anything for the users. And this is the Indian initiative. I have tried to combine all the Indian initiative, but I have given some of the important initiative here. Now, international initiative, Directory of Open Access Book, in short, DOAB, Directory of Open Access Journal, DOAG, DOAG, or Open Educational Resources, World eBook Library, Project Gutenberg, Online Dictionary and Encyclopedia. All these are, there are so many open access initiative by international initiative, but I have given some of the important initiative here. All these are giving online free open access resources. These are the World eBook Library. There are so many websites which are giving online free information resources. I have given the list of the website here. The dictionary and encyclopedia, we don't have to read the physical consult or read physical dictionary or encyclopedia if we consult this website. There are so many encyclopedia, dictionary available in the website. Medical information, we can go to this site also. For e-thesis and dissertation, there are so many. If we combine all the resources, open information resources, then it will, I think, reach to crores of course open information resources. But it will be very difficult for the undergraduate students or any users to choose the correct one. In that case, we have to manage or organize the resources so that the users can avail these resources. First, happening to me, I have given some of the ideas here for managing e-resources. First, we have to select the resources which are very useful for the users or readers. Then divide the resources language-wise or subject-wise or semester-wise, which is very effective for the users. I have tried to give some of the example here. Like for Bengali books, we can give this website or link to the users in the website of the college website or library website. From them, users can get Bengali books, free Bengali books from this site. Like next, it is like botany books. For botany books, I have given some of the link here for botany books link. From chemistry books, we can give this kind of link to the users for chemistry link. For mathematics, we can give this kind of link to the users. For physics, we can give this kind of link. For philosophy, we can give this kind of link. Open information resources have so many disadvantages like quality and reliability, loss of copyright, technology issue, physical problem, threat to the library profession, and resistance to change. There are so many disadvantages. In conclusion, we can say that we are going through serious pandemic situation. Almost all educational institutions from primary school to university are closed. In this critical crisis, we have to adopt open access information resources, though they have so many merits and demerits. Or we may adopt blended mode, that is, paper and online resources may be supplied to the users. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradut, for your talk. Now, is there any other presenters present in the meeting room who would like to present their paper today?
Sir, yes, sir. Naveen, sir.
Naveen, you are ready with your paper?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You may please go ahead and present your paper.
Yes, sir.
No, I have seen that. But another, somehow I couldn't do that from my end. Could you please pass it on? Okay. Naveen, please go ahead. Start your presentation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome all. Good afternoon. My name is Naveen. I'm studying at Bishop College, Tiruchirappalli, Tamil Nadu. I'm here to show you quantum computing. We are going to see the basics of quantum computing, bits versus qubits, quantum cryptography, the power of quantum computing, problems and practical issues of quantum computing. Abstract. Quantum computing is a modern way of computing that is based on the science of quantum mechanics and its unbelievable phenomena. It is a beautiful combination of physics, mathematics, computer science, and information theory. It provides high computational power, less energy consumption, and exponential speed over classical computer by controlling the behavior of small physical objects. Example, microscopic particles like atom, electron, proton, etc. Here we present an introduction to the fundamental concept and some idea of quantum computing, and then let's move on to the basics of quantum computing, bits versus qubits, quantum cryptography, the power of quantum computing, and the problem and practical issues. A team of researchers affiliated with several institutions in China has built and tested a photonic quantum computer that demonstrated quantum supremacy. In their paper published in the journal Science, the group described their computer, which they call Jingzhong, and how well it performed while conducting Gaussian boson sampling. Introduction. Human invented the electronic calculator 8 years ago. Since then, the world of computing has witnessed seismic advancement in the past few years in information processing have especially been transformational. What we were once thought of science fiction fantasies are now technological realities. Classical computing becomes more exponential, faster, and more capable, and our enabling device smaller and more adaptable. We are beginning to evolve beyond classical computing into a new data era called quantum computing. Quantum computing is a type of computational that harnesses the collective properties of quantum state such as superposition, interference, and entanglement to perform calculation. The devices that perform quantum computation are known as quantum computers. The basics of quantum computing. All computers rely on a fundamental ability to store and manipulate information. Current computers manipulate individual bits, which stores information as binary 0 and 1. For example, when our human eyes see a letter A, our computer see a specific string zeros and 1. From social media to spreadsheet, everything is done through these sequence of zeros and ones. Where current computers use bits, quantum computer use qubits. The bits is our current computers can only be either 1 or 0, but not both. But qubits can be represent 1 and 0 at the same time. So if computers were coins, current models would be a coins flipped with either heads or tail as the only outcome. But quantum computing would be like spinning the coin. The computer doesn't have to choose one or the other. This allows quantum computers to look at many different variables simultaneously. The good news is that quantum computers would be thousands of times faster than our current computers, possibly reducing the time to solve the complex problems from hundreds of thousands of years to milliseconds. Bits versus qubits. Consider first a classical computer that operates on a 3-bit registers at any given time. The bits in a register are definite state such as 101. In a quantum computer, however, the qubits can be in a superposition of all the classically allowed states. In fact, the registers is described by the wave function. Qubits are made up of controlled particles under means of control. Example, device that trap particles and switch them from one state to another. Where
Navin,
the
sorry to
first,
disturb you. You have 2 minutes to complete. Okay.
okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay.
There are complex number whose amplitude square the probabilities to measure the qubits in each stage. For example, the probability to measure the registers in the state 010. It is important that these numbers are complex because the phases of number can be constructive and destructive interference with one another. This is an important feature for quantum algorithm. Quantum cryptography. The expected capabilities of quantum computation promise great improvements in the world of cryptography. Ironically, the same technology also poses current cryptography techniques a world of problems. They will create an ability to break the RSA coding system, and this will render the almost all current channels of communication insecure. The power of quantum computing. The integer factorization is believed to be a computational infeasible with ordinary computation for large integers that are product of only few prime numbers. Example, product of two 300-digit primes. By comparison, a quantum computer could solve the problem more efficiently than a classical computer use source algorithm to find its factor. The ability would allow a quantum computer to break many of the cryptography system in use today, in the sense that there would be a polynomial time algorithm for solving the problem. In particular, most of the popular publicly ciphers are based on difficult of factoring integer, including from RSA. These are used to protect secure web page, encrypted email, and many other types of data. Breaking these would have significant ramification for electronic and privacy security. The only way to increase the security of an algorithm like RSA would be increase the key size and hope.
Navin, please conclude it. Please conclude it.
Sir?
Please conclude it in 1 minute, perhaps.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Just 1 minute. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Problems and practical issue. There are a number of practical difficulties in building a quantum computing, and thus for quantum computers have only solved trivial problems. David Divenzo of IBM listed following requirements for practical quantum computers. Scalable, physical to increase the number of qubits. Qubits can be initialized to arbitrary values. Quantum gates faster than decoherence time. Universal gate set. Qubits can be read easily. To summarize the problem from the perspective of an engineer, one needs to solve the challenge of building a system which is isolated from everything except the measurements and manipulation mechanics. Furthermore, one needs to be able to turn off the couplings of qubits measurements so as to not decoder the qubits while performing operation on them. Conclusion. There is just one catch. It will be years or even decades before quantum computers can operate in a place or alongside transistor-based computers. If someone makes a breakthrough in developing a fault-tolerant system with quantum error connection, it might be the time to get excited about the quantum computing that will be Godzilla-sized step along the path that ends in a genuinely usable mission. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Navin. Just one line of suggestions for you, perhaps. Everybody else present paper or in conferences or journal because we have something to add to the already existing body of knowledge. So please, my friend, for the future, remember this new thing may be that very tiny data or maybe a new question, but it has to be on your own. So for the future, my friend, please remember that to go beyond whatever is there in the book or whatever is there what is known already. So,
okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. Now moving on, may I call upon Mr. Dr. Koti Thababani. Are you here, Dr. Koti Thabamani, for presentation? Dr. Koti Thabamani, are you here? Or anyone else who would like to present today in this session? Am I clear? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Are there anybody who would like to present in this session today, or we would call it a day? Dr. Kodi Thabamani, the presentation list showing he's here, but I think there is some sort of network issues. So if nobody has anything to present today, may we conclude the session, second session, first day. We may again meet tomorrow at the 10 a.m. Our first session, second day, tomorrow, which is tomorrow, would be starting from 10 a.m. sharp. So all of the presenters, participants are requested to join beforehand. And let us meet tomorrow and enrich ourselves. One of the? Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, all of you, for participating in this wonderful occasion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Meet you tomorrow. One of the, you may end the session here. Thank you.